At its peak, the British Empire was the largest in history, controlling nearly a quarter of the world's land and population. The British proudly claimed that the sun never sets on the empire. But what happens when that sun begins to fade? Was it wars, economic decline, or resistance movements that brought down this global superpower? Did the empire collapse overnight, or was its fall inevitable from the start? For centuries, Britain built its empire through military conquest, economic exploitation, and strategic alliances. From India to Africa, the Caribbean to the Middle East, British rule seemed unstoppable. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were forming, cracks that would eventually shatter the empire. So how did the most powerful empire on Earth unravel? And what lessons does its collapse hold for modern global powers? Cracks in the empire. At its height, the British Empire projected an image of dominance and stability. But beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming. The empire relied on two pillars: economic exploitation and military force, both of which became increasingly unsustainable. For decades, Britain extracted raw materials, wealth, and labor from its colonies while forcing them to buy British goods. This economic imbalance made many regions dependent yet resentful. Heavy taxation, unfair trade policies, and famine caused widespread suffering, leading to rebellions and uprisings. One of the most significant was the 1857 Indian Rebellion, also known as the First War of Independence. What started as a mutiny among Indian soldiers escalated into a full-scale revolt against British rule. Though Britain crushed the uprising, it exposed just how fragile its grip on India really was. In South Africa, the Boer Wars, 1880 to 1881, 1899 to 1902, revealed another weakness. The British expected a quick victory against the Boers, descendants of Dutch settlers, but instead faced years of brutal guerrilla warfare. To suppress the rebellion, Britain resorted to concentration camps and scorched earth tactics, damaging its reputation and draining its resources. Beyond military struggles, economic mismanagement and overextension further weakened Britain's global hold. The empire stretched across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Middle East, but maintaining control required an enormous military and bureaucratic system. As costs skyrocketed and economic crises hit Britain, sustaining an empire of this scale became harder. By the early 20th century, Britain still ruled vast territories, but resistance was growing. Every revolt, war, and crisis added pressure, pushing the empire closer to its inevitable decline. But the real breaking point would come in the World Wars. World Wars and the beginning of the end. The World Wars were the turning point for the British Empire. Not only did they drain Britain's resources, but they also ignited anti-colonial movements across the globe. During World War I, 1914 to 1918, Britain relied heavily on its colonies for soldiers, raw materials, and funding. Over 2.5 million Indian troops fought for Britain alongside thousands from Africa, the Sakura, Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. But while Britain preached democracy and freedom in Europe, it continued to oppress its colonies, fueling resentment. After the war, economic strain forced Britain to increase taxation and tighten control, leading to growing unrest. The Amritsar Massacre, 1919 in India, became a symbol of British brutality, strengthening the call for independence. World War II, 1939 to 1945, was even more devastating. By 1945, Britain was economically crippled, rationing food at home while struggling to maintain its empire. The war also shifted global power. The US and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, while Britain's dominance faded. American pressure and promises of self-rule encouraged independence movements. Across the empire, nationalist leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in India, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya gained momentum. The British could no longer hold on through force alone. By the end of the war, Britain faced a stark reality. It could no longer afford its empire. The demand for independence was unstoppable. The once mighty empire, built on economic exploitation and military power, was now in freefall. The wave of independence. By the mid-20th century, the British Empire was unraveling at an unstoppable pace. The world had changed. Nations no longer accepted foreign rule, and Britain no longer had the resources, military power, or political will to hold on to its vast colonies. The most significant blow came in 1947, when India gained independence. Often called the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, India was its largest, wealthiest, and most vital colony. After decades of nonviolent resistance led by Mahatma Gandhi, coupled with increasing unrest and the economic toll of World War II, Britain was forced to grant independence. However, the process was far from smooth. The partition of India and Pakistan led to one of the largest mass migrations in history, with millions displaced and hundreds of thousands killed in violent communal riots. British rule had left behind deep scars, and independence came at a devastating cost. Next came Africa and the Caribbean. Inspired by India's success, nationalist movements surged across British territories. In Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah led the charge, making it the first African nation to gain independence in 1957. Over the next 2 decades, British colonies across Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe fought for and achieved self-rule. Some, like Kenya, faced brutal British resistance, including the infamous Mau Mau Uprising, 1952 to 1960, in which thousands of Kenyans were detained, tortured, or killed. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, nations like Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados gained independence in the 1960s and 70s. The transition was often peaceful, but economically challenging, as these nations had been structured to depend on Britain for trade, governance, and industry. The Middle East also saw the British retreat. After World War II, the region became a geopolitical hotspot, with rising nationalist movements and Cold War politics shaping its fate. In Egypt, 1952, Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, leading to the Suez Crisis of 1956, where Britain's failed military intervention exposed its global decline. By the 1970s, Britain had fully withdrawn from the Gulf states, including Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. The British Empire may have faded, but history never stops. Want to uncover more hidden stories of power, rebellion, and global change? Hit that like button, subscribe, and dive into more eye-opening videos on our channel. Your journey through history is just beginning.